Good evening, everyone. For those just joining, I want to again thank you for taking the time to be here with us virtually today. Today, we are covering two proposed EPA actions to reduce ethylene oxide risk at commercial sterilization in healthcare facilities. These actions, if finalized, would apply to the American Contract Systems commercial sterilizer facility in Fort Myers. I'm Rachel McCullough from the Environmental Protection Agency, and I'm the moderator for today's meeting. First, I want to acknowledge that for many of you, this is the first time you are hearing of this topic and are uncertain how it impacts your and your family's lives. And for that, we sincerely apologize. Our goal today is to introduce you to this topic by providing an overview of what it is, why we are here, and what we are doing about it. While there is a sense of urgency to today's meeting, we want to emphasize that this is not the first or last time we will be here. We are here today because our mission at EPA is to protect human health and the environment. And because EPA is taking a series of actions to reduce health risks from a specific chemical, ethylene oxide, that is both a source of air pollution in America and a source of potential risk to workers who work with this chemical. Today, we'll share background information about these health risks and the significant steps EPA is taking to protect workers who are exposed to this chemical, as well as people who live, work, play, or go to school or daycare near facilities that use it. And we'll also talk about how you can get involved in providing input on EPA's actions. We understand it can be hard to learn about potential health risks you might be facing, because some of the information for how EPA is addressing this risk can be pretty technical. I want to acknowledge that this is not necessarily an easy conversation we're going to have here today. As an agency, we are committed to meaningful community engagement and discussion on what environmental contaminants are impacting communities. That is why we are here today. We strongly believe that this communication is important and that for us to best protect health, we need to share the information we have with you all. It is also important that we do that in a way that is understandable and that helps inform decisions you might be making about your own lives. This is part of why we have a lot of time set aside today to take questions from you. If we say things that are hard to follow, we speak with too much technical language, or we just don't cover things that are important to you, please let us know, and we'll take the time to explain things a different way. Before we turn to the presentations, I want to take time to explain in more detail how the question and answer session will work. We're going to answer questions at the end after all the presentations are completed. Please feel free to submit a written question using the Q&A feature on Zoom, which is one of the bottoms at the bottom of your screen during the question and answer session of the meeting. Any comment you have about the proposed action should be submitted via the regulations.gov website as a written comment. More details will be provided later in the meeting on that process. We will provide direct written answers to some questions as they come in, and for some others, I will read the question and our panelists will answer them out loud. We're going to do our best to answer as many questions as possible today. That may mean that we group similar questions together for our panelists, and I may also ask our panelists to clarify or add detail if I feel an answer was unclear. If you feel that your question is important and we didn't get to it, or if you feel the answer to your question wasn't clear or quite what you were looking for, please know you can always email us at eto@epa.gov, and we will work to answer your questions there in the coming days. This is an informational meeting, and we will do our best to answer your general questions, which you submit via the Q&A. If you wish to have your comments and concerns included on the record as part of the formal process for any of the EPA actions we are discussing today, that is a separate process. There are several ways to make your voice heard, and we will be discussing those in more detail as part of our presentations. So, with those instructions out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to those you'll be hearing from today. We will have a welcome from the Acting Administrator for EPA Region 4, Janine Gettle, and a panel of EPA experts, including Caroline Freeman, Director for the Air and Radiation Division, Seneca Anderson, an engineer in the Air and Radiation Division, and Madeline Beal, EPA Senior Risk Communications Advisor. We will also have technical experts available for a question and answer session, including our partners from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The question and answer session is limited to the current rule and the risks that have been identified. Please be mindful that we are unable to accept verbal comments on the proposed rule and action, and those should be submitted formally online or via mail. As we get started with today's presentation, I would like to turn it over to the Acting Regional Administrator for EPA Region 4, Janine Gettle. Ms. Gettle has been with the agency for over 36 years and brings a wealth of expertise to the environmental protection work in the Southeast. In fact, Ms. Gettle has extensive knowledge with the two statutes we will be discussing today, the Clean Air Act and the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. In her role as Regional Administrator, she oversees our agency goals of protecting human health and the environment here in the Southeast region. For those of you that don't know, Region 4 represents 8 states, including Florida, and 6 federally recognized tribes. Acting Regional Administrator Gettle is a strong and passionate leader who has dedicated her career to insurance science, and the law guides the protection of public health and the environment for all communities. R.A. Gettle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be with us to learn more about the issue of ethylene oxide emissions in this area of Fort Myers. I also want to thank the staff and leadership at the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. We work closely with both of these organizations and their teams to ensure the fair implementation of environmental laws and the protection of public health and the environment, as we are fortunate to have them coordinating with us throughout this process. As you have heard, we are here today to talk about air pollution from a chemical called ethylene oxide. As my colleagues will discuss in more detail, ethylene oxide can cause health risks, and it is also an important chemical to ensure the safety of a wide variety of medical devices that are used by doctors, hospitals, and dentists. This chemical is used in a type of facility known as a commercial sterilizer. There are about 86 commercial sterilizers around the country, and some of them are emitting ethylene oxide into the outdoor air at a level that is concerning. This includes the American Contract Systems facility in Fort Myers. We are here because EPA is in a rulemaking process to address risks from these types of facilities. And EPA is committed to communicating clearly, frequently, and as transparently as possible on matters of risk. So it was extremely important to us that we convene a meeting with you, the residents, and other impacted groups near the American Contract Systems facility. A typical rulemaking at EPA flows something like this. A rule is proposed with an identified public comment period. It's typically 30 days. It can be extended to 60 or 90 days, depending on the nature of the rule. The agency then takes the comments that are received, we assess them, we respond to them, and we finalize the rule. And that generally takes about a year. And then from the effective date of the rule, companies generally have 3 years to come into compliance. This traditional process provides the community with a certain amount of time to learn about the rule and provide feedback, all during the rulemaking process. However, EPA is committed to access, equity, and leadership. And so as we began our rulemaking process last fall, EPA also began conducting early outreach to communities with commercial sterilizers emitting ethylene oxide over a certain risk level. This was a departure from the normal process that I just described, but a process we felt was very important to ensure communities understood the risk and had an opportunity to participate in our rulemaking. When we started this early outreach process last fall, We were unaware of the risk level posed by the American Contract Systems facility, so we did not initially reach out to your community. However, as will be discussed in more detail later, we are now aware of the risk. So even while we are in the midst of the rulemaking process, we wanted to meet with your community. So we are here today to provide you with background information on ethylene oxide and an overview of the proposed actions the agency is taking public comment on at this time. The public comment period for these actions ends on June 27th. The timing is not ideal, but there is still time for you to participate in this process. Our purpose today is to give you information so that you will be informed about how this issue impacts you and your family, and you can make an informed decision about participation in the public rulemaking process. We believe your perspective is valuable to this process. As I stated earlier, although we are in the middle of the public comment period, this is only the beginning of the conversation. EPA is sharing this information so that you have access to the same information that we have at EPA, and so that you can make an informed decisions about risk and your health. EPA is committed to keeping you informed throughout this process. And so before I turn it back over to Rachel, I want to leave you with the following. Risk in the Fort Myer area near this facility is high, and EPA is concerned about this risk. We are committed to protecting health in communities facing risk from ethylene oxide, and we are taking this issue seriously. I commit to you today that we will continue to work on this issue until the risk levels are reduced. This includes using the tools we have available to us at EPA, such as regulations and on-the-ground partnerships with states, communities, and facilities, and working with anyone who can help us to reduce this risk. These partnerships have already reduced risk in a number of communities, but we can and need to do more. You deserve to be part of this process, to have your voices heard, your concerns shared, and your needs met. We are here to provide you with the background information to assist you in asking questions today, and as importantly, submitting your perspective to the official record, which must be done by June 27th. You can also find more details about everything we will talk about tonight, including how to make your voice heard on EPA's website, over the phone, by directly emailing us and submitting formal comments for the record. I want to thank you again for joining us today, and I will now turn this back over to Rachel.
Thank you, Janine. Our next presenter today is Caroline Freeman. Caroline is the EPA Region 4 Air and Radiation Division Director, where she oversees a team of technical experts working on air issues in Region 4. Caroline works closely with local, tribal, and state governments, like the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, industry, and others to achieve and maintain clean indoor and outdoor air, including reduction of exposures and risks associated with criteria and hazardous air pollutants, like the EtO risk from the commercial sterilizer in your community. Caroline, I'll now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Good evening, everyone. As Rachel stated, I am Caroline Freeman, and I serve as the Director for the Air and Radiation Division at the Environmental Protection Agency Region 4 office in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to be here today. At the EPA, it is our mission to protect human health and the environment. You've already heard that there is pollution in this community. It is coming from an air toxic that is called ethylene oxide, which we often refer to as EtO. Acting Regional Administrator Gettle said, "It is unfortunate that we are unaware of the risk in your community when we began early outreach last fall. but we are here today to inform you of this risk. At this time, I'm going to share information on one, the long-term health risk posed by the inhalation of uncontrolled ethylene oxide emissions from the American Contract System facility, which is located at 11,600 Adelmo Lane in Fort Myers. Two, I want to talk to you about the recently proposed EPA actions designed to reduce risk. And three, encourage each of you to comment on these proposed actions. Let's review briefly what we know about ethylene oxide. Occasionally, people call this chemical EO as well. So if you see ETO, EO, or ethylene oxide, it is all talking about the exact same chemical. You usually can't smell or see ethylene oxide in the amounts we find in the air near facilities in these communities. As far as the usage of ethylene oxide, for the most part, ethylene oxide is used for two main purposes. First, in the chemical manufacturing process, ethylene oxide is used as a building block to make antifreeze, and in some processes, plastic bottles and other consumer goods. We are not concerned about the risk to you from that type of use in this community. The second is the use of ethylene oxide in the commercial sterilization industry at facilities like American Contract Systems, which is located here in Fort Myers. At American Contract Systems, ethylene oxide is used to sterilize medical equipment and supplies for the dental and medical industries. Specifically, ACS assembles and sterilizes customized surgical kits for local area hospitals, medical facilities, and veterinary clinics. For this conversation this evening, the ethylene oxide of concern is coming out of the American Contract Systems facility as air pollution only. We have no indication that ethylene oxide is being discharged into the water or onto the ground in any way that would cause risk. We have learned that ethylene oxide is more toxic than we previously thought, and that it can cause cancer when people are exposed over long periods of time. Specifically, ethylene oxide can cause breast cancer and cancers of the blood and lymphatic system. By long periods, we mean when people who live near these facilities breathe ethylene oxide every single day for 24 hours a day from birth until age 70. But it's also important to point out that some people are more at risk from exposure to ethylene oxide than others, either because they spend more of their time in areas where there is a lot of ethylene oxide, like workers who work at these facilities, or it can happen because for some reasons, their bodies are more susceptible. Children and babies are more vulnerable to exposures of ethylene oxide. And because we know that children are more vulnerable, we explicitly consider that in our analysis. Today, we're also here to inform you of the most recent steps that the EPA have taken to deal with this exposure from operations such as the American Contract System, At the EPA, we have proposed 3 separate regulatory actions to lower emissions of ethylene oxide into the air to reduce the health risk that it poses. We believe that the best way to reduce the risk that ethylene oxide poses is to reduce its usage and to reduce the amount that is emitted into the environment. First, we have proposed more stringent standards under the nation's pesticides control law, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, or FIFRA. These more stringent requirements will apply to all uses of ethylene oxide as a pesticide or sterilizing agent and are designed to provide greater protection to workers and communities. Second, we have proposed to strengthen our existing federal regulations that govern air emissions from commercial sterilizers like American Contract Systems. These proposed changes are designed to significantly, number 1, reduce air emissions from these facilities, and 2, reduce risk to the surrounding community. And third, we have proposed to strengthen our existing federal regulations that govern air emissions from chemical manufacturing plants. We won't focus on this proposed action today because there are no chemical manufacturers who use ethylene oxide in the Fort Myers area. Seneca and Madeline will be sharing more detail about the first 2 proposed actions in a few minutes and how those proposed actions will reduce ethylene oxide usage and minimize emissions. Now I'm going to share more detail about the analysis we have completed and what it tells us about these facilities. EPA scientists analyzed the best information and data available, some of which were collected from these types of facilities in 2021 and 2022. For this facility, we received the most recent information this past May. The EPA combined that data with other local information like weather patterns and the locations of homes. Using those factors, the EPA was able to model the risk from ethylene oxide. I want to note that the EPA's analysis only reflects your potential exposure risk related to ethylene oxide from the American Contract Systems. So the risk that I'm sharing information about today is an additional or incremental long-term risk of getting certain cancers from ethylene oxide that we have modeled. To estimate risk from a given chemical, we need to know 3 things: how toxic the chemical is and how close the source is. In this case, the source is ACS. How much of the chemical is in the air and how long throughout a person's life he or she may have been exposed to that chemical. Because EPA's analysis must be protective of human health, we use estimates of how long people are exposed that are on the extremely high end. For exposure to ethylene oxide, we are talking about people who live nearby American Contract Systems. Additionally, for community exposure, we assume that people spend all of their time in the area where the risk exists. Specifically, we assume exposure for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from birth to age 70. Breathing in ethylene oxide in the area where there is risk. Those might not be realistic assumptions because almost everyone leaves their home at some point. But these assumptions do ensure that we are being protective of human health for everyone, even in the most extreme situations. For worker exposure, we assume exposure 8 hours a day, 240 days a year for a period of 35 years. And we also take into account any worker protections that are in place, such as personal protective equipment. This gradient map that is displayed on the slide is used to show the EtO risk from the American contract systems. I would also preface that we believe that there is elevated risk to people who live near American contract systems. But I want to be clear that there is also potential risk to people who work in these facilities or who work or go to school nearby these facilities. Now, I want to point out a few features on the map. The dark orange box is the facility itself. The lighter orange area is a non-residential area near the facility where risks are high. And the blue area includes residential areas where risks are at or above 100 in a million. The area of elevated risk extends roughly half a mile to a mile in all directions from the ACS facility. From Pagefield Airport and the Floormont Manor neighborhoods in the north to Sunrise Boulevard and the villas and the Rokene neighborhoods in the south. And from US Highway 41 in the west to Honeysuckle and Ranchant Roads in the east. In the blue area, the darker shading reflects higher risk and lighter shading, lower risk, albeit still at or above 100 in a million. Note that as you move away from the facility, the blue shading gets lighter, meaning that the risk gets lower until it completely falls off. I want to note that there is some uncertainty in these estimates as both operations at the facility and weather can change, but these are the best health protective estimates we have available. At EPA, we use 100 in a million as our benchmark for identifying whether risk levels are considered higher and are of concern to the EPA. So when we say 100 in a million, we are saying that we estimate ethylene oxide exposure could contribute to an increase of 100 cancer cases if 1 million people were exposed at that concentrated level for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from birth to age 70. We start our calculations at birth because we want to make sure that we are protective of children. Under the Clean Air Act, we focus on risk where people live. We are also concerned about risk to workers and others who might spend part of their time in the light yellow or non-residential area and in the facility itself. But for this analysis that we're talking about tonight, the EPA focused its modeled risk on residential areas. We will share more on actions that the EPA is taking to address risks to workers and others who spend increased time in these non-residential areas near facilities in a moment. The information we are sharing today and that we have posted on the web is all based on information that EPA collected from American Contract Systems about their use of ethylene oxide. In many areas, several facilities have already taken action to reduce ethylene oxide pollution, and others are planning to do more to reduce their ethylene oxide emissions as well. I would say that we have learned from our partners with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection that the American Contract System will be installing controls on their operations, and those controls are expected to be installed and up by July 4th of this year. At EPA, we are very concerned about the risk in this community. We have also learned that ethylene oxide is not a chemical that lasts for a long time in the environment. Like lead or forever chemicals like PFAS that you've been hearing about that linger, this is not the case for ethylene oxide. This means that by reducing the amount of ethylene oxide coming out of this facility, it will also reduce risk to the neighboring community right away. Again, today our focus is on American Contract Systems located at 11,600 Adelmo Lane in Fort Myers, Florida. The facility has been utilizing ethylene oxide to sterilize surgical kits and medical supplies and equipment since 2011. Thank you for your attention today. And at this time, I will turn to our moderator, Rachel, to share additional information. Rachel?
Thank you for that information, Caroline. For those who are just joining us, you will be able to use the Q&A button or raise your hand during the question and answer portion of the meeting so that you may ask questions. If you are listening on your phone and cannot access the Q&A function, press *9 to let us know you are having technical issues. Once we identify you by the last 4 digits of your phone number, press *6 to unmute. At this time, we're going to continue on with our next presentation. I'll now turn things over to Seneca Anderson, who will be providing information on the proposed rule for commercial sterilizers who use ethylene oxide. Seneca?
Hello, everyone. Is my video working? Can you all see me?
We see you, Seneca.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Seneca Anderson, and I work in the Regulatory, Community, and Air Toxics section of the Air and Radiation Division at EPA's Region 4 office. The short version of that is that I'm an environmental engineer on Caroline's staff. Today, I will be talking to you about the more technical aspects of EPA's proposed action under the Clean Air Act and how it will reduce emissions of EtO from commercial sterilizers like the American Contract Systems facility. As Caroline mentioned earlier, EPA is proposing 3 actions to reduce emissions of EtO. I will be continuing Caroline's overview of the proposed rule for commercial sterilizers under the Clean Air Act with some technical details on how the proposed regulation will reduce EtO emissions from these types of facilities. The Clean Air Act, which is a federal law, gives EPA the authority to regulate sources of air pollution. Additionally, the Clean Air Act amendments of 1990 give EPA the authority to regulate a subset of air toxics called hazardous air pollutants. There is a specific list of these pollutants, and EtO is on the list. So EPA is using its authority under the Clean Air Act to propose this regulation to further reduce EtO emissions from commercial sterilizers. First, I want to provide a little more national context. There are currently 86 of these commercial sterilizers operating in the country. You can see where they are located on the map here. The blue dots show the location of the 25 sterilizers where we anticipate risk to be the highest for the people who live nearby. American Contract Systems in Fort Myers is one of these 25 facilities with the highest level of risk. We are focusing the conversation tonight on this facility because we believe there is higher risk to people who live nearby, but I want to be clear that there is also potential risk to people who work in these facilities or who work or go to school nearby. We considered all 86 of these sterilizers when we developed solutions to reduce emissions in our proposed regulation. Additionally, this has been a long process that EPA has been working on, gathering data from all of these facilities. And as Caroline mentioned earlier, unfortunately, all the information for this facility was not gathered until around May. And that is why we are here today to provide this information to you. Next slide, please. Now, where this pollution is coming from within the facility is important so that we can understand how solutions can be put into place to reduce the risk from EtO. There are two types of ways that EtO can leave a facility. The first is that after EtO is used to sterilize objects, it is sucked into a control system. These control systems actually clean EtO out of the air and capture it or break it down so that the EtO released is a much smaller amount. This type of emissions coming out of a facility is called controlled emissions and is generally released through a stack in the roof of the building. At this time, American Contract Systems in Fort Myers does not have controls on their processes at this facility. However, ACS is in the process of installing controls for their stack emissions. The second type of emissions is from EtO that doesn't get sucked into a control system. It is from EtO that escapes through other places, such as leaks and gaps or windows and doors. This type of EtO is often called fugitive emissions because it is emissions that are not captured by any control equipment. Unfortunately, fugitive emissions are not covered under the current regulation because when that regulation was written, the importance of fugitives was not well understood. At American Contract Systems in Fort Myers, we estimate that 97.5% of the EtO emissions are in the form of uncontrolled stack emissions released through the vent in the roof, and 2.5% are the emissions from fugitive emissions. In fact, because there are no control systems in place at this facility at the moment, all the ethylene oxide used at the facility is emitted to the air in some form. According to the records that we have, they use about 2,000 pounds or 1 ton of EtO per year. At facilities that have controls, the fugitive emissions have been modeled to be the main driver of risk. However, because ACS is currently uncontrolled, the stack emissions are the main driver of risk. So this risk will be greatly reduced once ACS finishes its installation of the air pollution control equipment. If the rule is finalized as proposed, they would then need to install additional controls for fugitive emissions. So the best solution to reduce the EtO risk from this facility is to reduce its emissions of ethylene oxide entering the environment. Our proposed regulation under the Clean Air Act will require greater control of stack emissions, but more importantly, it will also require capture and elimination of fugitive emissions that are not currently being controlled. We estimate that our proposed regulation will reduce EtO emissions from all commercial sterilizers across the country by 19 tons per year, which is about an 80% reduction nationwide. More importantly, our proposed regulation will ensure that the lifetime cancer risk will be below 100 in a million in every community located near any of these facilities, including here in Fort Myers. We're proposing a compliance deadline of 18 months after we issue our final rule, instead of the 3-year period which is afforded in the Clean Air Act. And we are requesting comments from the public on this proposed compliance deadline. I want to reiterate that by reducing the amount of EtO coming out of this facility, the risk to the community will also be reduced. To ensure that the proposed regulation under the Clean Air Act will result in lower EtO emissions, we are also proposing to improve American contract systems and other sterilizers' accountability through more robust testing, monitoring, and reporting of EtO emissions. We are proposing to significantly increase the monitoring requirements to include continuous monitoring of EtO emissions at the facility, and we are requesting comments on the rule as proposed. To summarize, our proposed action under the Clean Air Act will significantly reduce EtO emissions from commercial sterilizers like American contract systems through a combination of control equipment for so-called fugitive emissions, tougher standards for stack emissions, and improved accountability through more thorough testing, monitoring, and reporting requirements. You've heard me say a few times that EPA is requesting comments on the rule as proposed. Specifically, there are 82 specific topics or aspects of the proposed rule that EPA is especially interested in hearing comments on, although you can comment on any part of the rule. But these topics are identified in the text of the rule with a numbering system that has the letter C followed by a sequential number, such as C-1, C-2, and so on. We have an example here on this slide for the proposed emission standard for sterilization chamber vents, or SCV, as shown on the slide, which is topic number C8. If you are reading the proposed rule, you can just scan for the topic numbers or do a computer search, Control F for C-, and then whichever one you are interested in. So the timeline for our proposed regulation under the Clean Air Act, the regulation was published in the Federal Register on April 13th. The comment period extends to June 27th, and we are conducting webinars and meetings at the national and local level through the end of the comment period. We expect to issue our final rule within 1 year of the end of the comment period, and we are proposing a compliance deadline of 18 months once the final rule is issued, and we are requesting comments on that. This concludes our presentation on the proposed regulation under the Clean Air Act. Now, Rachel will introduce our next speaker to talk about the proposed FIFRA action.
Thank you, Seneca. I would just like to remind everyone that you can place your questions in the Q&A feature in Zoom. Hopefully, we're addressing that with our presentation currently. We will respond to them at the end of the meeting. Now we're going to transition to Madeline Bill, EPA's Senior Risk Communications Advisor. Madeline is here to talk with you today about EPA's proposed actions to address EtO under our EPA Office of Chemical Safety and Pollution Prevention. Madeline?
Thank you, Rachel. I'm just recovering from a cold, so I just want to apologize at the outset because I know my voice is a little rough. Before I get started on my portion of the presentation, I just want to share that I understand that the presentation today has already been heavy. It's heavy because of how much technical and governmental process information we are sharing. And I'm going to share some more technical and governmental process information myself. But it's also heavy because of how it feels for us to share and for you to learn about air pollution and risk in your community. While I can't possibly understand what it would feel like to be in the audience today, I do know what it feels like to worry about the health of my children and my family. And I just want to validate that it's reasonable if you feel scared or upset or angry at anything you are hearing tonight. Now, to come back to some of the information that my colleagues have already been discussing, there really are 3 different ways that we are reducing risk at ACS and at other commercial sterilizers around the country. So the first bullet here talks about efforts to reduce the amount of EtO that comes out of facilities like this one. And Caroline and Seneca both talked about this bullet and our efforts to reduce the EtO coming out of ACS using the Clean Air Act regulation. And then the third one here is work that we are doing to reduce risk as soon as possible. And we're doing this risk in partnership with the state of Florida. And Seneca talked a little bit about this work as well. So this is work that we're doing ahead of these regulations and these new actions. But the part that I'm going to talk about next is this bullet number 2, which is highlighted in yellow here. And this is our efforts to reduce risk that are associated with how EtO is used as a pesticide. Oftentimes when we say pesticide, I think the first thing that jumps to mind is an agricultural setting or maybe something that a farmer would use on crops. But when EtO is used to sterilize things, it is also considered a pesticide because it is being used to kill pests, right? It is being used to kill bacteria viruses and other germs. And so that sterilization process then is in fact using EtO as a pesticide. EPA sets requirements about how pesticides are used under a different law. It is called the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, or FIFRA. EPA does this by setting rules for how the pesticide can be labeled for use. And we often say the label is the law in this context. The label sets the rules for how the pesticide can be used, in what conditions, for what purposes. It can set specialized requirements for protective equipment for the workers who use the pesticide. And it can even set requirements for monitoring when the pesticide is in use. The process of updating a label happens through what we call a proposed interim decision, or PID. And I want to be clear at the outset, before I get into what we've seen with our analysis and the details, that we really are proposing a lot of different actions in this PID, in this proposed interim decision, that will reduce risk both inside and outside facilities, like the one at ACS, the one in Fort Myers, where EtO is used to sterilize things. And I'm going to cover those in more detail in a moment. But before I get to those actions, I want to talk a little bit about the analysis that we completed that shows why these actions are needed. So next slide, please. So as a part of our effort to develop this proposed interim decision, we completed a risk assessment looking at, in addition to some of the residential exposures, which Caroline talked about, we also looked at exposures to workers and others who might work or go to school nearby. So anyone sort of in that yellow area was also included, but this assessment also looked at some of the residential risk as well. We did this risk assessment to understand who exactly was at risk, to make sure that as we're proposing solutions, that those risks are reduced. What we learned is that risk to workers who use EtO directly over the course of an entire 35-year career is especially high. We also learned that this risk is higher where more EtO is used and where workers spend more of their time in areas where EtO levels are especially high. We learned that there are also potential risks of concern for others who might work at this facility, even if they don't directly use EtO in their jobs. So if there's an administrative office that's attached to a facility like this one, we learned that there is also risk in those spaces as well. And that we learned that there is potential risk as well for those who might work in a neighboring facility or that might go to school in a facility that's very close to one of these facilities, including ACS. The risk to folks who don't work directly with EtO are not as high as the risk for those who do, but they are still risk of concern to us as an agency. And as we have proposed solutions, we really did propose a comprehensive set of actions that when implemented will reduce risk, both for the workers that work directly with this chemical and those who work or go to school or daycare or just live nearby. So next slide, please. So I want to talk about what those actions are. And so I'm going to talk about them in two categories. The first is the things that are in the proposed interim decision, really high level thoughts on what will reduce risk. There's a lot more in this proposed interim decision than just these bullets, but these are sort of the big picture ways that we're reducing risk. And then I'm going to talk for a moment, in a moment, about some of the actions that are in the proposed decision that will actually be focused on making sure the risk is reduced. But for the actions that are reducing risk, the first is we really want to encourage facilities and require facilities as the PID is implemented to reduce the amount of EtO they use to sterilize things. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for making sure that medical equipment that enters the medical supply chain is safe for use. And the Food and Drug Administration actually sets the methods that allow sort of safety and making sure that things are sterilized. But there are different methods that the FDA has approved that use a lot less EtO than many facilities are currently using. So we're encouraging and will require facilities to use those methods that use less EtO, but still achieve the same job if the PID is implemented or when the PID is implemented. The second thing is to reduce the amount of time that workers spend in areas where EtO is at these higher levels. And this is going to include requiring engineering controls such as automation, separating HVAC systems between offices and EtO sterilization facilities. It could include increasing ventilation in storage areas, and other emissions capture technologies that would reduce exposures to workers during this whole process. The third bullet here is that we would also, under the proposed interim decision, be requiring increased use of personal protective equipment. That is what PPE stands for, personal protective equipment for workers in sterilization facilities. And then we're also actually proposing that this need to wear PPE is actually linked to some real-time monitoring that we are also proposing requiring to make sure that if there is any indication that EtO levels get high, that workers then immediately would need to wear PPE. 4 and 5 don't actually apply to ACS, but I want to cover them because I think they are important steps for the agency in reducing risk from EtO use. But they won't apply to the ACS facility in Fort Myers. But number 4 here on this list is we're actually disallowing the use of EtO when we found that there were already appropriate alternatives available to sterilize things. And so this includes some archival uses, EtO use in museums or for musical instruments, and EtO use for beekeeping. So EtO will no longer, when the PID is implemented, be allowed for those uses. And then finally, we are also requiring some new engineering controls for healthcare facilities that sterilize medical equipment as well. So these are sort of smaller scale ethylene oxide sterilizers that are often housed within hospitals or doctors' offices. And we are requiring additional controls on those as well. So next slide, please. So as my colleague Seneca discussed, it's not just about reducing risk. It's also about showing that we reduce risk and making sure that facilities are actually held accountable to actually achieve that risk reduction. And so that is true under the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act as we think about the pesticide use of EtO as well. So we are also adding some new accountability requirements that are going to help us make sure risk comes down. The first I already mentioned is we are proposing requiring real-time monitoring for EtO inside of these facilities. And this would be at 10 parts per billion, which is the lowest level, lowest concentration that we can actually measure in real time. It is a level that would still be associated with some significant risk, but it is the best available technology we have, and it will help us make sure that levels are not in these facilities, that we have some understanding of what these levels are. The monitoring would be required both in places where EtO is directly being used, but also would be required in administrative office spaces and others where EtO is not directly being used. And then if that monitoring shows levels above 10 parts per billion, all employees working in that area would be required to immediately wear personal protective equipment. Additionally, a second part of new requirements and new data that we're going to be collecting to make sure risks come down is that there will be new data collection and reporting requirements for commercial sterilization facilities. And that these requirements and data collection would help us identify and improve the protective monitoring technologies, but would also help us assess the effectiveness of the mitigations that we have put in place, right? So we want to make sure that these solutions are working, and we want to do that over time. As an agency, we are only required to reassess a pesticide registration every 15 years. But we know if this risk remains high, that is way too long. And so we are committing to you, the agency is committing that we will accelerate this timeline if the data that we collect through these new mechanisms show that the high levels of risk remain. If the risk levels don't come down like we anticipate they will, then we will re-review and add more levels and more layers of protection. So next slide, please. So I know my colleague Seneca talked through the timeline for the Clean Air Act part of this. I wanted to put both timelines on one slide so we could talk through both the Clean Air Act part and the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide part, or FIFRA part, together, so you guys can see how the two align. So again, both of these actions were published on April 13th of 2023. The public comment period is open until June 27th of 2023. Once comment period closes, it typically takes the agency about a year to address all the comments, make changes to these two sets of actions, and then post what are considered sort of the final rule or interim decision. Interim decision doesn't sound very final, but it's the equivalent of a final rule. And once those two things are posted, then the compliance clock would start and facilities would have to start to comply with the law, depending on which rules implemented. And that's where you see down below the two actions sort of diverge a little bit. As Seneca said, under the Clean Air Act, once that final rule is published, as it's written right now, facilities would have 18 months to comply with that final rule. For the proposed interim decision on the pesticide FIFRA side, it actually depends on the action. So if it's an action that's maybe easier for a facility to take, like perhaps requiring more personal protective equipment, that might be a lower, easier thing to achieve. That might have a shorter timeline. But if it's something that requires completely redesigning engineering systems at a facility, that might have a longer timeline. And so once the interim decision is published, it typically would take 1 to 5 years, depending on the difficulty of the action. And I want to note that there is sort of this implementation timeline for both actions is something that you can comment on. And it is something that when there are comments on it, it does sometimes change how the agency actually sees implementation playing out. So right now it's proposed to be 18 months in the Clean Air Act, and it's proposed to be 1 to 5 years in the proposed interim decision. But those are definitely things that you could comment on if you don't think those timelines are acceptable. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to come back to this. There really are different ways that EtO can cause risk in communities and to workers. And EPA is taking a comprehensive approach. Just in the last few months, we have proposed actions to address risks that might be coming from facilities where EtO is actually created, chemical plants. We're also addressing risk from commercial sterilizers like ACS in Fort Myers, and we're doing that through 2 sets of actions, both the orange, which my colleagues Seneca and Caroline talked about, and the yellow, which I talked about under FIFRA. But we're also working to address EtO that might be coming, risks that might be occurring in hospitals or doctors' offices and other places with smaller sterilizers. And the yellow piece of this would also apply to those. So next slide, please. So the final thing I want to end on is just that we at EPA, we do spend our time worrying about risk in communities and worrying about risk to workers. We really want to make sure these rules and actions are protective and that they meet the needs of impacted communities. But we can't do that as well if we don't hear from you all. So we really do want your voices to be heard. We want to hear from as many community members or others who are impacted by these decisions as possible, so that we can make sure that these sets of actions, the interim decision and the rule, are as good as they can be to meet the needs that you all have. And with that, I think I will turn it back to Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. At this time, we're going to continue on with our final presentation, and we'll have time for questions in just a short while. Please feel free to continue sharing your questions in the Q&A. As Madeline stated, I want to reiterate that if you wish to have your comments and concerns included on the record as part of the formal process for any of the EPA actions we are discussing today, we'll explain that process now. At this time, we'll be presenting some information on the official public comment process. I'll now turn things over to Seneca to walk us through that. Seneca?
Thank you, Rachel. Like you said, at this time, we'll reflect on what we've heard so far, and then I will take everyone through an in-depth look at the EtO webpage and discuss how you can comment on the 2 actions that we've heard about. So to recap, here are the 3 key points. EPA has learned that EtO is potentially causing risk to communities and workers. 2, we have proposed comprehensive solutions to reduce this risk. And 3, we are seeking public comment on these solutions. All right, now, Terry, if you can turn the control, yes, I will share my screen. All right, so what I have here is EPA's main EtO webpage. This is EtO. It'll also take you to this URL as you see there. Now I'll show you some resources on this page and how to navigate around and how to make public comment. So if you scroll down, this column here on the left has a lot of information about EtO, our current understanding of it, and understanding of EtO risks and health impacts, and what you can do. This column here in the middle shows our outreach materials, such as public webinars, the community engagement, and fact sheets. Now, this column over here in the green box, comment on proposed ETO actions to reduce risk. The second bullet shows the rule under the Clean Air Act that I discussed earlier. This third bullet talks about the proposed interim decision that my colleague Madeline just discussed. And this fifth bullet here is how to submit written comments. So if you click on that, it'll take you to this webpage here. And this has a lot of information about how you can email or send written comments or submit them directly online to the docket. You'll hear me refer to a docket. That's the collection of documents and information all posted together that EPA is using and considering conducting the rulemaking. So for the Clean Air Act regulation, you can go right here. I've got it pulled up over here, and this will take you to regulations.gov. And here you can see the docket number for the Clean Air Act rule. And right here up at the top, the blue button says comments. And also here, you can see comments that have already been submitted and posted. So these are all public comments that you can see. And if you click on comments, it will take you to this page. And here you can type in your comment, and you can attach any files that you may have, any pictures or PDFs or things like that, document files. Now you can put your email address here to submit a comment as an individual or on behalf of an organization, but you can also submit it anonymously if you don't want to have your name or email associated with the comment. And then right before you can submit it, it'll ask you to fill out a CAPTCHA to prove that you're not a robot. And then once that is clicked, you can submit the comment here, and make sure to click the submit comment. And I'm walking through you all this because this is, the most important way to get your comment submitted onto the docket. All right. So after that, Terry, if you could put up the contact slide, please. All right, and finally, Terry's going to put up a slide that shows all of the contact information of everything that we have talked about. Here it is. So there's a lot of information on this slide. So if you would like, you can take a screenshot or take a picture of this to refer to later. As has been mentioned, this recording will also be posted on the website. So at the top, epa.gov/ETO, that's the main website I showed you with all the information and resources for learning about ETO. If you would like to email comments, you can do that directly to the ETO@epa.gov email address, or you can go to the regulations.gov website and submit comments through the docket as I just showed. And if you were to take that route, these docket numbers are for the actions talked about today. The docket number in blue is about the Clean Air Act rule for commercial sterilizers, which I discussed. And the docket number in green is for the FIFRA rule that Madeline talked about. And as has been mentioned, the comment period is now through June 27th by 11:59. And this QR code at the bottom right of the screen will also take you to regulations.gov and can be scanned with your smartphone camera. All right, and now I'll turn things back over to Rachel to moderate a questions and answer section. But I would like to note that while we are happy to provide any clarification and discuss, answer any questions here, if you have anything that is a comment on the rule or any information that you would like to be included in the rule or in the analysis or anything that you think EPA needs to consider, please submit that as a public comment, either through any of the methods listed. That is the only way to make sure that it is officially recorded and used for the rulemaking. Thank you very much. And I'll now turn it back over to you, Rachel.
Thank you, Seneca. Now that we have shared the information on risks, EPA's proposed actions, and how to comment on those actions, who'd like to take some questions from you now. If you have questions on the American Contract Systems facilities, we can take that as well. As Seneca mentioned, you can put your questions there in the Q&A feature. However, if you would like your comments and concerns to be included on the record, that's the formal process that you just outlined. In addition to our EPA speakers that you've heard from already, we have several additional experts and partners with us today who may help address certain questions to ensure we provide the fullest answer. The panel is coming off camera now, and I'll introduce them briefly. And in addition, we have Hastings Reed, Deputy Director with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, Air Division, Sterling Woodward with the Hillsborough County Environmental, I'm sorry, I don't think we have Sterling, Dr. Michelle Ziegler and Peter Kowalski with the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, and Sarah Watterson, our monitoring expert with EPA. So with that, I'll turn over to, I see a couple of hands are raised, and I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. I'll start with some of the questions that have been placed in the Q&A. What does this mean for someone who works about a quarter mile to the south, but is in an office building most of the day?
So I can try to take that one. So the analysis that our folks did as they were working on an analysis to understand whether or not we should change how EtO can be used as a pesticide. That analysis they did looked at folks who might work in a facility nearby. There are questions, right, to understand what it might actually mean on an individual level. So one is how many years have you actually worked there, how close you are, as you said, about a quarter mile away. So you can sort of get a sense of where you are on the map that Caroline shared. But the analysis that we were looking at was found risk for folks if they were spending 35 years nearby, that there were elevated risks. 35 years of a career, right? So it's like 8 hours a day in that case. The other thing is, depending on how much outdoor air gets in, can change things as well. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of great science or knowledge on how much air gets into and out of buildings, because it really does vary depending on where you are and what systems are in place. But something like a normal HVAC filter wouldn't capture this, right? Because EtO is a gas, it's not a particle, and that's what HVAC filters are typically designed to capture. I don't know if that's helpful. Hopefully it answered the question, but if not, I'm happy to see if others might have things to add.
Thank you, Madeline. Our next question, and thank you for right to the point. We're going to try to go through all of these questions really quickly. How many years has the EPA been aware of ethylene oxide dangers? And how many pounds of this chemical is being released annually into Fort Myers air?
Hi, Rachel. Sorry, I can answer that. I'm having some trouble with my video, but so the answer to how long EPA has been aware of the risk from this facility, as has been mentioned, EPA has been working on this issue, incorporating the latest science and gathering the latest data and using that for the risk modeling. But unfortunately for this facility, we did not have all of the required information until this year. In May, we were able to complete the analysis and understand the risks in this community from this facility, and that's why we are here today. Thank
you, Seneca. And we also have Brandy Jenkins, our EPA Public Affairs Director at Region 4, who's also going to be assisting us with answering some of your questions. Brandy, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, thank you, Rachel. I was just going to identify Seneca to answer that. Thank you.
Okay. How can people be tested to see if they have EtO in their body?
Hello, this is Peter Kowalski from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry. I'm an environmental health scientist. Our agency is helping the EPA address ethylene oxide issues. So there are tests that are used to check for, to assess exposures, and these are most often used in studies of workers who are exposed to much higher levels of ethylene oxide. These tests are not available in doctors' offices or through commercial laboratories. There's also several challenges interpreting these results, especially at the lower levels that we see in communities. The tests cannot determine the source of the exposure or the length of time of exposure. Also, the results cannot determine if any past, present, or future health problems are linked with the test results. For additional information, or if there's additional questions, we have a email box, which is eto@cdc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We have another question about how long ACS has been in operation. I believe that Caroline covered that in her presentation, that the facility has been using EtO to sterilize surgical kits and medical supplies and equipment since 2011. Okay. Is that correct? Please correct me if I'm mistaken.
That's correct, Rachel.
I'm still getting questions, so bear with me. Why is this facility not shut down until changes are made to the hazmat filtering process coming from the facility? We've received several questions along those same lines. Can someone take that for me?
Okay. Rachel, I will start with the response, and then I'm going to ask my colleague from FDEP to please join me. Under the Clean Air Act, this facility it's less than 1 ton of ethylene oxide per year because they are utilizing less than 1 ton of ethylene oxide per year. Sterling or Hastings, I'm going to ask you to step in and also speak as the permitting authority for this facility.
Thank you, Caroline. Yes, and my name is Hastings Reed. I'm with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. The DEP is the permitting authority and compliance authority for this facility. And this facility has been in compliance with the applicable EPA regulations. And that means the existing NESHAP for commercial sterilizers that has been in place since the early 90s. When EPA updates these regulations, as I understand it, the facility will be making every effort to come into compliance in a timely fashion. But as EPA has noted during this presentation, the facility has voluntarily undergone the efforts to install the types of pollution controls that would be needed to comply with most of the rule. The rule isn't yet final, so every detail of what they'll have to do hasn't yet been finalized. However, they understood that controls would be needed, and so they've taken the initiative to go ahead and install the types of controls that would be needed. These controls will reduce the stack emissions from this facility by 99.9%. So you're reducing emissions of approximately 2,000 pounds to 2 pounds. There's still the fugitive emission component, which may be 20 or 30 pounds, but that's a fraction of what they're currently emitting. So this will significantly reduce the risk profile that EPA has modeled in the area. And as EPA also stated, these controls should be in place within 2 weeks. We've been in continuous communication with American Contract Systems about where they're at on installing these controls. And when those controls are installed, we do plan on reaching out and informing the public that those controls are in place, and letting EPA know that if they wanted to update their metrics for risk at that time, once they're installed and operating, they can do so.
And if I could just add a little bit on a sort of a national context on this, I think we often hear frustration when we tell folks, you know, the risk is too high, right? We're seeing risk that's too high. But then at the same time, we're saying in many cases, facilities are fully compliant with the law. And so that we don't really have a way to do something like shut a facility down. And the reason that this doesn't line up, as I think we've talked about a little bit in our presentations, is that unfortunately our understanding of how toxic EtO is, how dangerous this chemical can be, has changed, right? And also the ways in which people are exposed has changed. And that means that the regulations that we currently have on the books, frankly, are not protective enough. And we know that. That is why we are taking these actions now, so that once these updated regulations are in place, they will be protective of health. But I think I heard some frustration in the way the question was asked, right? And I think we shared that frustration, which is why we are trying to move forward with new regulations that will be more protective.
Thank you. We've received several questions about monitoring. One question is, when the scrubbers are installed and working, will there be sensors placed in strategic locations to monitor any chemical leaks or discharges, and how can the risk be mitigated?
Yes, Rachel, I can take that one. So as I mentioned, the rule as proposed is currently would require continuous monitors at the stack emissions for this facility. And those would monitor EtO coming out of the control equipment, which would also be required, and leaving the facility through the stack. Additionally, there are reporting requirements for this type of emissions, for all the emissions, and they would be required, as proposed, they would be required to submit semi-annual reports to their permitting authority, which in this case is the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. So I can turn it over to our colleague Hastings Reed to elaborate on that a little more.
Thank you, Seneca. So once these regulations are in place, the department will be ensuring that they have an air permit that includes all of the new requirements that EPA have promulgated. And that air permit will include compliance requirements to make sure that the department can determine whether or not they are meeting those requirements. So as Seneca said, the final rule, I think if it's finalized as proposed, will require some degree of continuous emissions monitoring. And that would be data that would be reported to the department and would be able to check the compliance of the facility. And the department includes all of these documents and are publicly available for this facility. And when the new requirements come in, those new requirements will also be publicly available. So they'll all be posted on the department's publicly facing database.
Thank you, Hastings. And I would like to add, so we both just discussed the Clean Air Act requirements. The FIFRA Act requirements would also include requirements for monitoring in the worker space.
Thank you. Thank you. And while I have you, I have another question about equipment being installed and active by July 4th, 2023. Could you confirm whether or not that's accurate, and what changes in emissions are you expected once that equipment is installed?
Thank you for that question. So, we are working closely with ACS, and as they have told us, their plan is to complete installation, by that time frame. We plan on, receiving information from them about whether they get the pollution controls installed sooner, or whether, there are any issues that cause a slight delay, but it won't take, these controls are going to be installed imminently, from a Clean Air Act timescale. And once they are installed, they will be reducing the amount of pollution through the stack by 99.9%. So as I stated earlier, this facility currently emits about 2,000 pounds a year, or 5 pounds a day. And the emissions per year from this facility will be reduced, to somewhere, once the controls are installed, somewhere between 25 and 30 pounds per year. So now you're talking about 1/10 of a pound per day. So a 50 times reduction in emissions.
Thank you, Hastings. I'm going to switch over to those who've been so patiently waiting with their hands up to ask their questions verbally at this time, and then I'll go back to the chat, okay? So Catherine Tyre, you have your hand raised. Could you unmute? And I'm going to respectfully ask for all of you to please just have one question, and then we will loop back to you if you have additional questions, okay? Catherine, can you unmute?
Catherine, you do appear to be unmuted, but you might be having microphone issues.
All right, Catherine, I'm going to give you see if you can unmute for me in a few seconds, okay? In the meantime, I'm going to move to Jesse Weeder. Jesse, can you unmute and ask your question?
All right, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I had just had a few other questions. I had talked to you guys earlier this morning, but I was curious about the possible, oh shoot, just one second. I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Doggone it.
Well, if you want to, I can go to Molly and
please.
then come right back to you. Let me come
Please.
right back to you, Jesse.
Thank
Okay.
you, ma'am.
Happens to me all the time. Okay.
Thank you.
Molly Mayo, you have your hand up. Could you unmute and ask your question?
I'm really excited about the changes going forward, but what about us who maybe have suffered consequences because of all this in the past?
So if I understand your question, you're asking if you have any health-related issues, how should you proceed?
Oh, I've been dealing with health-related issues for the past 6 years.
I'm
And
sorry.
I live, no, don't be sorry. It's a part of thing called life. I worked a stone's throw from the facility for probably 8 years, and I've lived 2 miles from the facility for 20 years before they were even a thought in corporate's eye.
So, I mean, I guess, one challenge, and first, I mean, I just want to share Rachel's thoughts, like, it may be part of life, but we never want to hear about health risks that are health impacts in communities. And so I am sorry for what you've been going through. Unfortunately, in many ways, and it's not particularly, it doesn't sound particularly helpful, but in many ways, what we do at EPA is really a forward-looking effort, right? We often don't have a lot of data.
No, I agree with that. And I'm clapping for you all for making them make changes going forward. That's awesome.
But in terms of some resources for you, our colleagues at ATSDR might have some thoughts on ways you could have a conversation with your doctor about whether ETO might actually have played a role in your health risks and other concerns. I guess I will let them speak to it if they're on.
Sure. Good evening. Yes. So this is Peter Kowalski, and unfortunately, my colleague, Dr. Ziegler, joined me tonight. But we do have some resources for physicians. Not when physicians go to medical school, they don't always get. They have to learn so much. They don't always learn about environmental medicine. So we do have resources.
I know I'm suffering from lymphedema as well, and they get no education on that either.
Yeah. So, my thoughts are with you. We'll share during the course of this some clinical guidance. In addition, the EPA and ATSDR have relationships with a pediatric environmental health specialty units. If you have specific questions, I could get you, we could have a conversation and link you with and also our Dr. Ziegler can, speak to your physician if you would like, but yeah.
I get with you offline, maybe tomorrow or in the next couple of days and
Sure,
discuss this.
Yes, that would be fine. The email address is, again, I did share that earlier, but we will share it. It's eto@cdc.gov. Thank
And
you.
it is on the screen now, so you can see
Okay,
it there.
perfect. Yeah.
I've been taking notes all night. And the slide flipped too quick for me. I appreciate you answering.
Sure. Best wishes to you.
I mean, because before, well, not to get into specifics, sorry, everybody else out there, but I was all, it's a long story, never mind.
Thank you for your question, Molly. And I am sure that I think you have the email address to follow up with Peter. Did you get a chance to jot that down? I think it's still on the screen.
Yeah, I did. ETO@cdc.gov. Should I put attention?
You could put Peter Kowalski, Kowalski. Thank you.
Oh, you don't need to spell those names. I grew up in Buffalo. I know them.
Thank you so much, Molly.
All right. Thank you. You've been awesome.
Well-
And Madeline, God, she needs some cold medicine or something for a doll.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to go back to Jesse. Jesse, did your thought come back to you on what you wanted to ask before I go back to the chat? Jesse Weeder?
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'm sorry about that. My question was, I had received an email from Evangelical Christian School. That's my son attends school there. He's 2 years old or just under. They said that they would be running HEPA filters in the classrooms. Now, I don't necessarily know a whole heck of a lot, but I do understand that AC units pull air from the outside and blow it in. I'm just curious if that is going to do much to mitigate any issues, or I'm sure it can't hurt, but I don't know what good it could really do.
So I might take that one, but there might be some thoughts from my colleagues in the region too. But unfortunately, we don't know a whole lot about sort of the indoor-outdoor transferal of ETO. We often get asked if air is safer inside than out, but it really depends on how close you are to the facility and then sort of where that outside, like how much outside air is coming in and then where it's coming in from. So those are, I mean, the questions you raise are questions that would be important to know the answer to if you wanted to know how that might work. There are some air cleaners and purifiers that could remove gases like ETO, but they're probably not what they're talking about running in this facility. Most filters and HVAC systems are designed to remove particles, right? Like things like dust. They're not designed to remove something like ETO, which is a gas itself. There are some specialized systems, and I think we do have a link that we could share from EPA's indoor air quality page that talks about some of this information. But unfortunately, they're probably what they're talking about using is not something that would be effective against ETO. I don't know if my colleagues in the region have additional things to share. I'll find that link for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeline. Does anyone have anything to add to what Madeline has shared? I do have a couple of questions I'd like to continue along that same vein, if I may, about what kind of protection people can use to protect themselves either indoors or out of doors? Does that make a difference at all, and things of that nature? And maybe that, again, there's several questions along those same lines. Is there any
Yeah.
additional? Mhm.
I mean, I think the same would apply to those questions, right? We just don't know a lot.
All righty. Thank you, Madeline. The next question, what is the potential impact on my family's health? Peter, do you have anything additional to add to what you stated before?
So yeah, this is Peter Kowalski. So the main risk of concern to ATSDR and EPA is cancer. And as our colleagues have mentioned, the risk increases with the length, the duration or length of exposure and the concentration. The two main studies that the EPA used to revise their risk assessment were based on worker studies, where the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health looked at cancer mortality in close to 20,000 workers. And they looked at all types of different types of cancers. And the ones that showed an association with duration and concentration were female breast cancer and lymphoma or blood cancer. Workers who are exposed to high levels of ethylene oxide in the workplace, particularly in places like confined areas, they may experience symptoms such as headache, nauseousness, and dizziness. We would not expect community members to experience those same symptoms.
Thank you, Peter. Our next question is, and there have been quite a few questions about shutting down the American Contract Systems facility in the meantime until a safe method of operation can be put into place. Will EPA be shutting down the facility and things of that nature? Someone address that question about potential stopping the operations in the interim until these measures can be put into place.
Rachel, I'll be happy to answer that question. And I will start by saying that the 600 in a million risk that the agency modeled is a population risk number that we use to inform our regulatory decisions, such as to identify what levels of controls are needed to make these facilities safe and ensure that our rules are protective of human health. Unfortunately, EPA does not have the authority under the Clean Air Act to require that this facility be shut down. But as you know, we heard earlier by my partners over at Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the control equipment will be installed at this facility by the 4th of July. And I will further say that the modeling that we have done allow us to quickly examine how risks are expected to change when the emission controls are installed. Since 97.5% of the emissions that are contributing to this risk is coming from uncontrolled emissions vented through the stacks at ACS, once those controls are installed and up and running, that risk to the community will reduce significantly to around 10 in a million from its current 600 in a million. Not only that, when these rules are finalized that we have proposed, where the closing comment period will end on the 27th, ACS will also have to address the remaining 2.5% of the emissions that are coming from the windows, doors, and also gaps in the facility, which will be covered under the rule that we will be proposing. So I'm going to, ask my state counterpart to come forth and see if there's any additional information that he can add, but at this time, EPA does not plan to move forward with shutting this facility down. In order for us to do that, we have to have some governing authority to do so.
Thank you, Caroline. Hastings, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that, once again, the department is the compliance authority, and we have determined that this facility is in compliance with the current regulations, and therefore it's entitled to continue to operate. It will come into compliance with the new regulations when they are proposed and the compliance date comes. Although, as I stressed earlier, they have taken the initiative to implement these technologies earlier. And I do believe that their plan is to get them installed here within the next 2 weeks, and that they will be making sure that those controls are in place and effective. So they will also be testing them at some point after they're installed to confirm the control efficiencies. And as I said, we do plan on informing the public about these next steps that ACS has taken, so that they are aware, and also letting EPA know that these measures have been completed.
Thank you, Hastings. And just a quick follow-on, will we be taking any legal action against ACS for failing to properly contain those chemical releases if they don't do what we're proposing in these regulations? Can someone speak to what are the implications for that?
Thank you, Rachel. I would make note that when these regulations are in place, as finalized and are effective, and the facility has to show compliance with those, the facility will have an updated permit that requires that they show compliance with all of the new requirements of the Clean Air Act regulations under the commercial sterilizer and ESHAP. And we will be making sure that the facility is in compliance with its permit, as we do for all of our regulated facilities. And if for some reason they are out of compliance, we do take enforcement and make sure that they correct any deficiencies and take penalties or other measures as needed if that were to happen.
Thank you, Hastings. You mentioned ensuring that they are compliant. I have a question about what monitoring will the EPA require to confirm that that ACS has been implementing the controls? Can you speak a little bit to the monitoring versus the modeling that was discussed earlier?
Yeah, Rachel, I would just make note that right now EPA's regulations as to what is going to be required for the monitoring of emissions are not yet finalized and are open for comment. And so, what exactly the facility is going to be required to do in 30 months or so, when these regulations are finalized and become effective and they're required to show compliance with them, is a bit down the road. I did make note earlier that they are planning on installing these controls, and that they do plan on showing that these controls are as effective as they say they are. That would not be a regulatory test per se, but they would be showing that their emissions have been significantly reduced, as I was saying earlier. That would be more like a regular stack test, not necessarily what EPA is proposing. They would need time if the rule is finalized as EPA has proposed it, which would require some sort of continuous emission monitoring system. I'm certain that would not be ready by 2 weeks from now. That is a much more resource intensive process for ACS and all of the commercial sterilizers around the country to get their hands on the specialty type of equipment that are needed for that. But we do plan on having them show that their emissions have been significantly reduced after the controls are installed.
Thank you, Hastings. I just want to remind those on the phone that if you would like to ask a question, just hit *9 to raise your hand, and then we will announce the last 4 digits of your phone number, and then you hit *6 to unmute. Okay, just want to give you guys those instructions as well. Hastings, another question we received is, did ACS receive a permit to operate out of this location? And if so, what agency permitted it? Could you or Caroline address the permitting of ACS?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. So the Florida Department of Environmental Protection is the permitting authority and the compliance authority for this as we implement EPA's regulations under the Clean Air Act in Florida. So this facility, I believe, applied for a permit in 2010, but began operation in 2011 and has subsequently renewed its permits as needed. They came in to get a permit to install these controls, as we require the facility to receive authorization to make substantive changes such as installing controls. So I believe about 2 years ago, the facility applied for the permit that the department gave authorization to install these controls.
Thank you, Hastings. I have a hand raised on the telephone. Your last 3 numbers of your telephone is 366. If you can hit *6 to unmute, we should be able to hear you. Let's give that a try.
Okay, so
Yes.
sorry, I had myself on double mute. My name is Kelly, and I do live in the Villas. We did not get a letter. However, people that live just a few doors down from us did get a letter. So I'm a little kind of wondering about that. But the other thing is, what did you guys know about this facility putting out EO emissions, and when did you guys know it?
Caroline, do you want to take that question?
Most definitely, Rachel. I was trying to get off mute. First, let me respond to the question about not receiving a notification about the meeting today, or because we did have a session earlier today or tonight. Please know that we tried our very best to get this information out to the community as widespread as we possibly could. And so I'm just happy that someone shared this information to you. I know the media also ran some segments last night to inform folks of the meeting today, but we did our best based on the fact that we were trying to get fact sheets developed and get this information out. We learned about this facility this past May. As a matter of fact, it was late May, early June by the time we got all of the risk information confirmed and got the final risk map for this facility. And so we have been working expeditiously here on this side of the fence at EPA to make sure that we pull the fact sheets together and get them mailed out to the community as quickly as we possibly could. So, you know, I'm very sorry that you did not receive one of the flyers, but we tried our very best. And sometimes even, you know, in trying to get it out, we can't always control the delivery of the mail, but we tried our best to get it out as quickly as we could as soon as we found out.
Thank you, Caroline. And I do want to remind folks, if we didn't touch upon it already, that a recording of this presentation will be available on the website at the bottom of your screen. It's fairly lengthy for me to say, but you do have that there, and you can also scan the QR code with your phone, and that'll take you to the website as well. If we do not get to your question today, I want to remind you that you can also, that we have captured it in the Q&A, and that we'll be placing that on our website to be addressed as well, and we'll be placing responses there very shortly. The recording for the presentation should be up in about 5 days. We'll do our very best to get that up as soon as possible. So thank you so much for your patience and your participation tonight. I'm going to check with this telephone number that's ending in 362. If you can hit *6, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, good evening. My name is Leo. I actually live in Camden Square, which is very near the facility. I have two concerns, basically. Was the facility aware of, or when did they become aware of the changes when it comes to the toxicity of the gas, like that they were finding more information about this, and were they obligated to notify the people who live around them? That's one thing, and the other thing is, like, is there any maybe good faith from them to shut down whatever usage of this process that they're doing to sterilize the medical equipment? I'm a physician myself, and I'm actually going to run it with where I work, because this is very concerning to me that we've been exposed to this. And I'm thankful that you as an agency have notified us, but were they aware of all this, and were they obligated to notify? And if they're doing things to change things for us, wouldn't it be a good sign of good faith at least to stop the operation until there is a safety level that is adequate? Because probably they're still working because they're under the regulations right now. They can continue to do so, I'm assuming. Thank you.
Hastings, would you like to take the lead on that one?
Yes, as I stated earlier, this facility is in compliance with its permit, and so that it is authorized to operate. EPA's efforts to reevaluate the risk, the long-term risk from this pollutant, is what triggers their obligation to look at whether or not the regulations for this facility need to be tightened. And that's why EPA has proposed to tighten these regulations, is to address that elevated risk that they discovered from the studies that they talked about earlier. And so as long as the facility is in compliance under the Clean Air Act regulations, it is authorized to operate in Florida. And, we are looking forward to the facility implementing these voluntarily installed controls here well ahead of any compliance deadlines, here in about 2 weeks.
Thank you, Hastings. At this time, I see Jesse, you have your hand up again. Did you have another question, or was from before? Jesse Weeder?
Yes, no, I had another question. I was just curious, all politics aside, is there anything that our city, state, county, duly elected officials can do? Can we bring this to their attention or anything like that?
Rachel, I will respond to that if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Mr. Jesse, I will say that, I can't advise you in that lane, but what I can encourage all of you to do, and that is comment on these proposed rules that we have on the table right now. Your voice matters. And, that's one of the reasons why we, push so quickly to try and get information out to the community, to have these sessions, to share this information with you about the risk so that your voices can be heard also in these proposed rules. Even though the work that the American contract system is doing right now at their facility to add on these controls, it will reduce the majority of the emissions that are coming out of the stack. However, There's still another 2%, 2.5% of emissions that are coming from this facility as it relates to when the doors are open, when the windows are open, and even when you have gaps in this operating facility. Those emissions do also come into the environment. With this rule that we are proposing right now, there is a timeline of 18 months for existing facility to fully comply with the rule. And that's one of the areas that's open for comment. EPA is taking comment on that 18-month time frame. I will also say that EPA is currently under a court-ordered deadline to finalize the proposed commercial sterilizer rule by March 1st of next year. And so that proposal was actually published in the Federal Register on May 31st, and that comment period is also open until June 30th. So this, proposed settlement agreement that's on the table right now is also going to speed up, when the regs are final for the additional fugitive emissions that will be addressed by this facility when this rule is finalized. But I strongly encourage each one of you to comment on the proposed rule that's on the table so that your voices can be heard.
Thank you so much, Caroline. I have a Jenny Daher with a hand up. Jenny, if I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name, can you unmute and ask your question?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Apologies if you guys have already addressed this, but change that caused you all to be aware in May. So I know that this ruling events have started in the past, I think you said fall. What was the change or what made you guys aware of this location in May?
Thank you.
Okay, you want me to answer?
Yes, please, Caroline.
Okay, the information that came into the EPA earlier this year, we partnered with our colleagues over at FDEP for verification purposes to go out, take a look at the facility to make sure that we had the latest information and the most up-to-date, accurate information about the facility's operations. And the facility had already purchased the control equipment, but the equipment was not installed when we initially modeled this facility. And so once we learned that, then we remodeled the emissions associated with this facility and found out that there was a risk level that was at or above 100 in a million. And at that time, we coordinated with our EPA headquarters office because we knew we were facing a public comment closing period of June 27th. Of June 12th. And so we coordinated with our headquarters office and requested an extension to that June 12th comment period closure to June 27th so that we can get out and communicate this information to the community and give this community an opportunity to comment on these proposed rules.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Most definitely.
Thank you, Jenny. The next hand up, I have Eleanor Rongo. Eleanor, can you unmute and ask your question? Lost your hand. If you have your question, feel free to put your hand back up. I have another phone number ending in 054. If you could unmute Star 6, I believe, to unmute.
Yes, I live over by the villas. I'm just questioning, does the EPA have a estimated time of when they're going to conduct another test after these controls are put into effect at the facility?
Okay. Excuse me, sir, I did not get your name. Can you please restate your name for me?
John Cox.
Okay. Mr. Cox, yes, as soon as this facility have installed their controls, the EPA will be remodeling the emissions from this facility. We have already did a preliminary model for this facility to see what that would look like, but we will use actual emissions data from this facility. Once the controls have been installed and they have conducted the stack test, we will coordinate with our partners over at FDEP, and we will take that information provided to our partners at EPA headquarters, and they will build the actual emissions from the stack test into the model and remodel the emissions from this facility. But what we looked at was the efficiency of the control equipment. And based on the efficiency of 99%, we actually built that into the existing model just to project what it would look like. But based on those projections, we are confident that once the controls have been installed, because 97.5% of the ethylene oxide air pollution that we are referring to in this meeting tonight is coming through the stack, being vented directly out of that facility.
Right. I was just wondering though, is that, how long is that going to take for that test to happen? Say they do have the controls in effect July 4th. Can we expect that test to be taking place within the month after that has happened, or is it going to be sooner? Is it going to be later, or is it going to be after everything gets approved and they go in and they do, you know, all the mitigation with the doors and the windows and all that stuff?
Sir,
Miss-
normally take, excuse
Oh,
me.
Caroline, I was gonna jump in and just say, Mr. Cox, thank you for that question. And what I would say is that the facility does not have a regulatory need to test under its current regulatory regime. However, when they install the controls, we have spoken to ACS and they have committed to conducting a test, mostly because they've purchased, partly because they've purchased and from a contractor these controls and want to make sure they work as they designed and as they purchased it. But it'll also confirm the control efficiency that we've been talking about, greater than 99.9%. And I do expect that non-regulatory test, to confirm that everything is working properly, will be in the order of approximately a month after the controls are installed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. I'm going to go back to Eleanor Rongo. Were you able to unmute and ask your question? Just, I think star 6 is to unmute, or?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, hi, thank you so much. I'm a local physician as well. Thank you for informing the public regarding this. It's not an easy task to do. Would like to request, are we able to request getting, so I've been researching, and the half-life of this particular compound could be anywhere for up to 60 days half-life. I'm concerned that gradually that still builds up into the air, absorbed into the atmosphere, comes down into rainwater. Are we able to request testing our local streams or our soil in addition to nearby facilities as well? Because I assume the statistics you're giving us is just the amount of rate released per day, but I mean, is that taking to the effect the amount absorbed into the environment?
I think I can take this one, or at least give a start. But if my colleagues in Region 3 want to add, that would be great too. So typically we find that EtO really does disperse once it enters the environment. So it doesn't stay around the facility for that long. So the 60-day half-life is really much more of a very controlled setting. You know, in the environment, we find that it sort of blows with the weather, as you sort of indicated. And we don't really have any indication that there's risk of concern associated with either soil or water. And we've looked into it a little bit. We really are, the risks that we see that are concerning are risks that are really close to the facility before the EtO has sort of had that chance to disperse.
Are you able to 100% assure that it's not in the environment? I mean, how are you able to tell me that it's not completely broken down by the time it's blown away into the air?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that I can give you a 100% assessment, but that's the general consensus from the scientists that sort of advise.
Now, are we able to request for the local soil and water to be tested? Because if these levels are actually higher with the half-life being this long, then this is a public emergency. You have a local school and a local hospital nearby, and you have, you know, innocent people in the neighborhood. I'm just asking so we can obviously mitigate this.
Yeah, I don't know of any request to test soil or water that we've received, because again, we don't usually see that being an issue, but we do often get requests to sort of do what we call ambient air monitoring. But even that is pretty challenging. EtO is a really hard chemical to measure. And given how toxic it is, in order to measure it at the level, like oftentimes people are really asking for us to put a monitor out to tell them that they're safe, right? That the level is safe and it's okay. And unfortunately, it's too hard to measure, and the risk is existent at such low levels. There's not a monitor that can tell us that. But the monitors, you know, at the source are very effective at knowing exactly how much is coming out. And so that helps us really understand what happens once it leaves the facility. But if you have more detailed questions, I mean, it sounds like you really want to get into the details of sort of how the scientists did this modeling. And I think that we could connect you to some folks who might be more knowledgeable, or perhaps
that would be
Seneca might be able to add, or Caroline. Yeah, maybe we can maybe connect you behind the scenes with some folks.
Yeah, I would appreciate it, because in theory, you have a chemical that easily breaks down, but if it accumulates, you know, with these agents such as water, that also becomes toxic over time.
Yeah, I don't think we have any indication that it accumulates. It is, I mean, typically it's not an accumulating or long-lasting chemical. I mean, it's one of the few good things about EtO is that as we reduce the amount that is coming out of a facility or that's exposing to workers, you know, the risk really does come down.
We could also direct her to some additional information on ethylene oxide on our website that was put together especially for communities to better understand how this chemical actually works. But based on the information that Madeline has shared and talking to our scientists, for the most part, the information that we do have available to us is that, you know, ethylene oxide is more so in the air and doesn't break down to the point where we've been able to identify it in groundwater or in soil. But I think someone just put a link in the chat for you, or thereabout, where you could actually.
And actually, probably the best, if you want to email, because I know we shared the email address, the best way probably actually is to email the eto@epa.gov. Because, and if you indicate that you have some questions sort of about how we modeled to think that the risk actually stops at those points, if you email that question, I think we can get you an answer from our scientists there as well.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eleanor. Our next hand up is a telephone number ending in 366. If you could star 6 to unmute, you can ask your question. Telephone number ending in 366.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. This is Kelly again over in the villas. And I have a question about the 30-day time frame for us to comment. When did that start and when does it end?
Okay, excuse me, April, I'm sorry. I can go ahead and answer the question. The comment period started on April the 12th, and it initially was to end on June 12th. We reached out to our EPA headquarters office and we asked for an extension after we learned more about these facilities here in, well, this facility here in Fort Myers for sure. And we were granted an extension until the 27th of June. And so that's the time frame that we're working within right now.
I think many of us didn't even find out about it till this week. So how would we have known? Yeah, how would we have known that we had this time frame?
First, well, we did not learn about this facility's risk until very late May, early June, and that's when we asked for the extension. Initially, the deadline was June 12th, and that's why.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah, and
So when did the notification actually go out to the communities?
We worked to prepare the notification and we started the mail out. I'm not quite sure on the date, but Rachel or Brandy, if you can assist me on when we actually got these packages in the mail, but we really worked expeditiously to get these notifications prepared, get the webinar scheduled, and get the website up and running to get this information.
And I can understand that and I can appreciate that and, you know, trying to get everything out there, but it almost feels a little bit like we're slighted in our ability to really think about research and respond because we're not really being given a full 30 days. Not if we have to have our comments in by the 27th. That's just 5 days from now.
Yes. Hi, Kelly. My name is Brandy Jenkins, the Public Affairs Director for Region 4. Hi, we understand, and it is very unfortunate that this time frame is so short. We, as Caroline mentioned, we prepared the fact sheets as quickly as possible. We wanted to make sure that all the information included was accurate. We prepared these fact sheets to go out in the mailing early last week, was as soon as we could get them out in the mail. And so we really were trying to reach as many people as possible. We understand that the timeline is short. And, you know, as things progress, as the public comment period closes, we have everyone's email address and we are starting a database list and we want to keep everyone up to date as we continue to get updates to this rule.
And so how are you getting all of our email addresses?
Well, for those of you that have registered on Zoom with your email addresses, we are taking that in to our database. But let me clarify this. When we send our mailings out, we use a database to collect to gather the addresses, and that is our best source of information. So if you know of someone that we may have missed, please email that, use that email address and share with us the information or give them our information and we will add them to our list. We want to make sure our list is as robust and correct as possible. So I know I heard earlier that some people received it and some people didn't. That could be an effect of the mail. Okay, so it could be effect of the mail system, or it could be, you know, we just did not have the most up-to-date information on the database that we used.
Right. And I can appreciate that. I do know people that live further south from me received it. I did not. I don't think my neighbors did. And I know that this gas goes where the wind goes, so it would have passed my house to get to them. So what you're telling me then is that we need to make sure that anybody who was missed, we get that information to you.
Yes, ma'am, as much as possible. That would be very helpful to us.
Okay. This is pretty concerning. I'm sure that people on this call understand as well, because I know just on my street alone, I've lived here 22 years, at least 9 people have passed away of breast cancer and pancreatic cancer. And now knowing this really bothers me.
Understandable.
I'm sorry, so sorry to hear that about your community.
Yes.
So I would think that anybody that lives in the villas, period, would be qualified to be on your list, to be
Yes.
notified.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And again, I will work with you directly to get that information, so we can make sure we have the most robust list.
And what was your name?
Brandy Jenkins. I'll put my email address in there if you want to we can communicate directly. And again, I just want to make sure everybody has the information.
Yeah. So I wasn't able to log into the Zoom, so I'm actually only on my phone.
Okay. That's right.
So-
You're on the phone. Okay.
So if she emails her contact information to the ETO at EPA.gov, or anyone who wants to be added to the database of addresses, that might be the best way to go. Would you agree?
Yes, that's fine, Rachel. Thanks.
Okay.
And
ETO
I
at
think
EPA.gov. Yes, I'm sorry.
What is the address again? I'm sorry.
ETO at EPA.gov. G-O-V.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate it. And thank you guys so much. I appreciate this call.
Thank you so much. I have another hand up, telephone number ending in 876. Could you star 6 to unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I would just like to reiterate a couple things. The lady that Kelly was just on, I think having 5 days is pretty ridiculous. I happen to be away out of town, and I'm going to be out of town until the end of August. And the people checking our mail, we received this mailer on Tuesday. They took a photo of it with their phone and sent it to me. I wouldn't even be here, and he wouldn't even know about this. So that's a problem. Second thing is the lady who came on at 9 o'clock. She had some very, very valid points. That she talked about the groundwater and the air. I think moving forward a little farther on that, if they would go at the building site, maybe 100 yards out, a quarter mile out, a half mile out, maybe even a mile and a half, check the plants and maybe some insects and wildlife. And I'm sure there's some smart people out there that's capable of doing that. That way you would at least know how far out there could be issues. Is that something that could be done or you would even consider?
I'm not sure I totally understand the question. You're suggesting that we could measure ETO in plants or wildlife? I just want to make sure I understand the question. Yeah, so there's not actually any, yeah, there are some chemicals that would actually work for, but ETO doesn't, there's not really a way that you could measure it in something else. It's really in the air and then it sort of blows away. So what we're concerned about is when someone is there nearby where it's in the air, breathing it in. It's not something that sort of stays in the body or would stay in the plants in a way that we could measure it. I believe Peter might have a little something to add on. I think he did speak earlier about blood tests for ETO, but they're pretty limited in what they can actually tell as well. But that might be something that he could add if he's still on.
Yeah. Yes. So this blood test is called a hemoglobin addict test, and ethylene oxide actually binds with molecules in the blood cells and forms a protein, which can be measured, and it is useful in studying workers at very high levels of exposures. There's actually been laboratory animal studies where they've looked at it as well. So it's possible to measure it in mammals, but I think it's without having background or this the knowledge, years of testing, it would have limited value.
I can tell you that my wife had breast cancer and lymph node cancer, and they removed everything, and our lives have changed drastically. I mean, we basically do nothing. She's not strong enough to do anything, and I would like to know a way that I could have her tested to see if this could have been caused, because nobody in her family has cancer there's no line lineage for that.
Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that, and I wish your spouse well. The test that is used in worker populations is only used to check for exposures in the last 90 to 120 days. It cannot measure exposures preceding that or before that, and it unfortunately it cannot predict or tell you whether that ethylene oxide had caused your spouse's cancer. And that's one of the difficult issues with ethylene oxide exposure. We know that it's linked and it's associated with these blood or lymphoid lymphomas and breast cancer, but there are other risk factors for these types of cancers as well, with some other environmental agents or air toxics like beryllium. There's a specific exposure that are specific to the disease, chronic beryllium disease, or asbestos exposure and mesothelioma. And we don't have that one-to-one specific exposure disease with ethylene oxide. I do want to point out too, though, that when you burn tobacco or other products are combusted, that there is ethylene oxide in that, and so we do know that smokers exposures are about 7 times on average. Their exposures are 7 times higher than non-smokers in the general population.
Okay.
And it might be worth just reiterating to Peter that I know we already shared the clinician's brief on ethylene oxide. But if you're interested in talking to your doctor about this issue, we find oftentimes folks tell us that their doctors just don't know enough about environmental health to be able to have these conversations. Although I will note we've had 2 physicians on tonight. So those are certainly educated physicians who are joining this call. But the clinician's brief from ATSDR is a very useful tool to start a conversation with your doctor. And I think it would be a good place to talk through what the risk factors might have been. And I also just would remind everyone, getting your regular recommended screenings for cancer is really, really important. And it's extra important if you think you're in a place where you might be exposed to higher risk sources. If you want more information on that, you can reach out to ATSDR or the pediatric environmental health specialty units, or you can just speak with your doctors. But we do always encourage that as well, especially in communities where there might be sources of risk.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you.
Madeline. And Peter as well. We've got quite a few questions in the chat about exposures to children at the schools and preschools nearby. I think that what you just said addresses some of those questions. So can we put that slide up real quick for those who had questions about getting in touch with the ATSDR and the PASU? I think that's the next. Yes, thank you so much. So I just want to keep this up for a second as we continue to take questions in case folks would like to ask questions about the health of their children. We take that very seriously as well. The next hand I'd like to go to is Eve Volkman. Eve, can you unmute?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you for hosting this evening. I will try to be brief. I had put 2 questions in the chat or the Q&A. Both of them kind of relate to the parts per million that's released over a period of time in order for those that are nearby in the communities to be exposed to it and to have adverse health effects. So I understand from what you gave in the presentation that, your cancer risk of 100 in 1 million is if you lived I'm in the villas, for example, for 70 years continuously 24/7 for 7 days. But I did some research from other organizations like the ATSDR and the California EPA, and they all have what looks to be like very minimal parts per million exposure broken down into exposure even to weeks up to a year, where folks can experience inhalation side effects and other things that are maybe not cancer related. Does the EPA have any type of measurement system like that? And can you, if they do, can you tell us what that parts per million or parts per billion has been over however long it may have been released from this particular facility in our area, so that as residents, we can make a better judgment of the type of risk that we may be experiencing?
Peter, did you want to tackle that, or Caroline?
Yeah, I could speak about the ATSDR does have minimal risk levels, which we develop or assign for chemicals, and we use non-cancer health outcomes. So our toxicological profile has those listed, and it gives the rationale for them, whether they were laboratory animal studies or human studies. And they also take into account some safety factors as well. For cancer, in our cancer slope value, we defer and use the EPA's numbers for that.
Similarly, for California, they're actually less, or their numbers are actually less strict than ours, but they are planning, I mean, we've had a lot of conversations with them, and they're planning on using the sort of more stringent toxicity values going forward too. I'm not sure exactly what their timeline is for changing their values.
So a quick follow-up question to that: where can we find that toxicological report with those values?
So it would be the part of EPA that does that work is called the Integrated Risk Information System. We can pull a link for you on the report that we created, or that part of EPA developed. And they base their information on 2 studies that were run by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOSH. And so they did studies that were based on worker exposures in facilities like these ones. But we can pull the link for you. It looks like, and we can put it in the chat. It looks like someone might be doing that now, so that you have access to that information.
And is there any information as to what the parts would have been coming out of this particular facility, to have something to compare it to?
We don't have a lot of historical information. I don't know if Seneca or Caroline could speak to what we have, what we know right now about the facility.
Okay, the one thing that we do know about this facility right now, and Seneca, please feel free to add any additional information that you may have, as well as Hastings. The one thing that we do know about this facility is that it utilizes right at 1 ton of ethylene oxide or less. Not only that, but we also know that because this facility don't have controls on as of yet, on an average, that's what's being emitted into the environment.
Okay, thank you. Seneca, did you have anything to add to that?
I can just reiterate what Hastings and I had said earlier, that that 2,000 pounds or 1 ton per year comes out to about 5 pounds per day. It's not easy to give that in a parts per million concentration due to the nature of a combination of stack and fugitives emissions. So that type of data we don't have access to, but based on the usage amount, we can average about 5 pounds per day. Currently, Hastings did also give some of the math on what that would look like after the controls would be installed.
Okay, thank you, Seneca. So we are at 9:25 right now, and I want to give our acting regional administrator, Janine Getto, an opportunity to close us out. There are still a lot of questions in the Q&A module, and we recognize that What we plan to do is have all these questions and draft responses to them and provide them on our website as we move forward. We want to make sure that your questions are answered. And again, we want to make sure that your voices are heard through the public comment process. So if you have any questions before the 27th on how to make your comment, please email eto@epa.gov. And we will make sure to that your questions are responded to. In addition, as Rachel mentioned earlier, we will have a recording of this session on our website. And again, we will have a list of the questions and answers as we get responses to them. I would like to turn it over to Acting Regional Administrator Janine Gettle to close us out.
Thank you, Brandy. And thank you to everyone who is still with us for joining us for this evening's presentation and sharing your questions and concerns with us. I've heard your frustration and your concern. We've all heard your frustration and your concern. It's critical that we understand your lived experience and that these impacts on communities are at the forefront of our decision-making. We understand that you and all communities are looking for action to solve the health threats that you breathe every day. We want you to know that EPA is committed to action and here to give you the most up-to-date information about the risk posed by ETO and your actions and our actions to address the ETO risk from the American Contract Systems Facility and similarly situated facilities. I want to remind you that your voice is important and can only be considered in the rulemaking process when your comments are submitted to the record, and that has to be completed by June 27th. We value your input. We want to hear from you. I hope you will consider submitting comments. We understand that it is frustrating that you have only such a limited amount of time to comment. And still, I want to encourage you to take that time and have your voice heard. And finally, I want to reiterate EPA's commitment to working on this issue until the risk level is reduced. I want to thank you again for your time, for your questions, for your comments, for hearing us out, and we appreciate you participating in this meeting. And we will close the meeting at this point in time. Thank you.